Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into Toni Morrison's absolute masterpiece, and we're looking at a house that isn't just a backdrop. It is a living, breathing, and deeply angry character. We're going to explore how the very architecture of a home can literally be built on the foundations of trauma, and how a physical space can hold this incredible, heavy, emotional weight of history. Let's get right into it.
124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom. I mean, what an unforgettable opening line, right? It just instantly kidnaps us and drops us into this completely alien environment where a house actually has a malicious personality of its own. Right from the jump, we aren't given some gentle, comfortable introduction. The author purposefully thrusts us into a reality where the supernatural isn't just some urban legend. It's an undeniable, spiteful roommate. This definitely isn't your standard ghost story. It's a profound look at how a suppressed, painful past violently forces its way into the present.
So let's start with Section 1, the character of 124, and how trauma haunts everyday life.
We're immediately introduced to a place where the normal quiet of everyday life is just violently disrupted. Morrison uses these highly specific, vivid sensory details to show us exactly how the supernatural interrupts the mundane. You know, it's not just scary noises in the dark. It's actual domestic sabotage. We're talking about two tiny handprints suddenly appearing in a freshly baked cake, a kettle full of chickpeas just dumped and smoking on the floor, mirrors shattering if you merely look into them, soda crackers crumbled in a deliberate line next to the doorsill. These are relentless, daily insults, and they ultimately drive the two teenage sons, Howard and Boogler, to literally stuff their quilts into their hats and run away from home for good. The trauma is literally evicting the living.
So with the boys gone, the women who are left behind, Seth, her daughter Denver, and the grandmother Baby Suggs, they're forced to wage this perfunctory, daily battle against this ghost. They are living a life totally suspended between the nastiness of life and the meanness of the dead. Just imagine having to treat your own living room as hostile territory. They simply endure the gusts of sour air and overturned slop jars because, to them, the source of this ghostly outrage is as understandable and as factual as the sun coming up in the morning.
Moving on to Section 2, a number, not a name, the power of an address.
This brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast between a dehumanizing plantation masquerading as a warm home and a simple numbered address in a free state. Just think about the terrible irony of a slave plantation being called Sweet Home. It's a name adorned with an adjective that suggests coziness, grandeur, and this false aristocratic grace, right? All while masking horrific, dehumanizing brutality. In stark contrast, we have 124. It's literally just a number. But to former slaves, a numbered address in a free state grants the ultimate dignity of independence. It signifies boundaries. It means having a door you can actually lock against the outside world. And tragically, the danger they thought they locked out was replaced by the historical danger locked inside with them.
We see Seth's daughter, Denver, approaching the house super cautiously, treating it exactly like a nervous, unpredictable relative whose moods dictate their entire reality. To her, the house doesn't just creak in the wind. It weeps, it sighs, it trembles, and falls into fits. When a physical space becomes the sole container for unexpressed grief, it totally takes on the characteristics of the traumatized people living inside it. Denver doesn't really have outside friends, so the house and its resident spirit essentially become her entire world.
Now for Section 3, the historical catalyst. Why exactly is 124 haunted?
To really grasp the big picture here, we have to anchor ourselves in the terrifying legal framework of the fugitive slave laws. This is the systemic horror that drives the whole plot forward and forces these completely impossible choices. You see, these laws meant that simply escaping across a border into a free state like Ohio absolutely did not guarantee your freedom. Slave catchers were legally permitted and financially incentivized, by the way, to cross state lines, hunt down escapees, and drag them back to the nightmare they had just fled. So, for a former slave, there was simply no true permanent sanctuary.
Look at how this timeline maps out the shattering of a brief, beautiful window of true freedom. First, Seth makes a harrowing escape over several days to finally reach 124 Bluestone Road. Then, she gets exactly 28 days. 28 days of unslaved life, of peace, of community, of experiencing what it actually feels like to love her children without the immediate looming threat of them being sold away. But then, in mere minutes, the inescapable reality of slavery rides right into their front yard. 4 men on horseback arrive, and in a matter of seconds, Seth makes a choice.
When cornered in the woodshed out back, Seth makes a split-second horrifying decision to save her children from the dehumanization of Sweet Home. She takes the life of her own toddler. This agonizing paradox, the idea that a mother's fiercely protective love could manifest as the ultimate violence, well, that leads us right to the psychological core of the story. The haunting of 124 isn't born from some simple cliché evil. It's born from a corrupted, absolutely desperate act of love. What happens when a mother's love requires the ultimate sacrifice for safety?
Let's dive into Section 4, Memory and Mother's Love, the best part that was clean. This brings us to what Seith was actually trying to preserve in that woodshed. As the quote says, "Whites might dirty her all right, but not her best thing, her beautiful, magical best thing, the part of her that was clean." She viewed her children as the only clean part of herself. The whole institution of slavery was designed to dirty you, to make you forget who you were and make you loathe yourself. But Seith's children were her beautiful, magical best thing. Her absolute determination that they would not be treated as property to be abused and quantified, well, that is the ferocious love that underpins this entire haunting. She claimed her children in a world where she had zero legal right to them.
And this perfectly illustrates how the haunting of 124 is a metaphor for the generational trauma of an entire population. Baby Suggs puts it so powerfully. Not a house in the country ain't packed to its rafters with some dead Negro's grief. When you think about it, Sethi is actually lucky she only has one ghost raising hell. The source material forces us to recognize that the American landscape itself is essentially a cemetery inhabited by highly vocal ghosts. 124 is just one concentrated, visible manifestation of the massive grief that packs the rafters of the entire country.
But what happens when the memory demands more than just, shaking the furniture or throwing chickpeas? When a young woman calling herself beloved literally walks out of the water and sits on a stump in front of the house, the trauma suddenly shifts from a ghostly presence to actual physical flesh. The physical manifestation of this trauma arrives at 124 and the chaotic presence just swells. Beloved feeds right on Seth's guilt. We watch as Seth shrinks down, practically starving herself, while Beloved swells up, demanding endless payment for the unimaginable price Seth paid for their supposed safety.
Denver has this profound realization. If it's still there, waiting, that must mean that nothing ever dies. It reminds us that the Herculean effort to just forget is constantly threatened by a memory that is desperate to stay alive. Seth wants nothing more than to just keep the past at bay, beat back the ghosts, and protect her future. But the physical embodiment of her trauma proves that you cannot simply sweep such profound pain under the rug. Nothing ever truly dies if the emotional debt hasn't been reckoned with. It's a pretty stark reminder of how buried trauma operates, isn't it?
Which leaves us with this really provocative final thought to consider. If the physical spaces around us hold our deepest, suppressed histories, how do we deal with a past that refuses to stay buried? When the walls of our history are literally a living character demanding to be heard, how do we ever truly walk out the front door? Because if the spaces we inhabit are packed with the grief of what came before, moving forward isn't about forgetting. It's about confronting the venom, understanding its source, and figuring out how to live alongside the ghosts we inherit. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning the history around you.